The other pilots at Kingscliff Airfield called him the coward, and Francis Gabreski was starting to believe they might be right. It was March 1943, and he'd been flying combat missions with the 56th Fighter Group for 6 months without scoring a single confirmed kill. 6 months of flying into German airspace, 6 months of engaging enemy fighters, and nothing to show for it except a reputation as the pilot who always broke off attacks, who always extended away when things got dangerous, who always seemed to find a reason to disengage. Gabby, as everyone called him, was 23 years old, the son of Polish immigrants who'd settled in Oil City, Pennsylvania. His father worked in the oil refineries, hard physical labor that paid barely enough to feed a family of 6. Gabby had been the first in his family to attend college, had studied engineering at Notre Dame, had joined the Army Air Corps in 1940 with dreams of becoming a fighter pilot. The dreams had come true. He'd earned his wings, been assigned to P-47 Thunderbolts, shipped to England with the 56th Fighter Group. But the reality of combat was nothing like he'd imagined. In training, everything had been clean, predictable. You flew your aircraft, followed procedures, executed maneuvers exactly as the manual described. In combat, everything was chaos. Aircraft appeared from nowhere, tracers filled the sky, men died in seconds, and split-second decisions determined who lived and who didn't. Gabby's problem was that he couldn't make those split-second decisions. He overthought everything. When he saw an enemy aircraft, his mind immediately calculated angles, closure rates, escape routes. He'd position for an attack, but then he'd see potential threats. Other enemy fighters that might bounce him, his own vulnerability if he committed to the attack, the risk of getting separated from his squadron. And he'd break off, extend away, choose survival over engagement. His squadron mates noticed. After his 5th mission, with no kills and multiple broken-off attacks, the squadron commander called him into his office. "Gabreski, what's your problem? You've got the skills, you've got the aircraft, but you're not engaging effectively. Every mission report has you breaking off attacks, extending away, avoiding combat. Why?" "Sir, I'm trying to stay alive," Gabby said. "Every time I commit to an attack, I see 3 other threats that could kill me. It seems smarter to survive and fight another day than to get tunnel vision on one target and get shot down." "That's not how fighter pilots think, Lieutenant. We're aggressive. We press attacks. We take calculated risks. What you're doing isn't calculated risk, it's just avoiding combat." "I'm not avoiding combat, sir. I'm being strategic. You're being cautious to the point of cowardice, and the other pilots are starting to talk. They don't want to fly with you because you're not reliable in a fight." The accusation stung. Gabby had been raised to value courage, had been taught by his immigrant parents that America rewarded bravery and hard work. Being called a coward, even indirectly, felt like a fundamental rejection of everything he believed about himself. But he couldn't change how he flew. He'd tried being more aggressive, tried committing to attacks the way other pilots did, and every time, his survival instinct screamed at him that he was making a mistake, that he was exposing himself unnecessarily, that there was a smarter way to fight. After that meeting, the squadron started openly calling him the coward. Not to his face, military courtesy prevented that, but in conversations he wasn't supposed to overhear. Gabreski broke off another attack today. "Yeah, the coward always finds a reason to run." The nickname spread through the squadron, became accepted truth. Gabreski was the pilot who didn't engage, who ran from fights, who couldn't be counted on. Gabby considered requesting a transfer, maybe to bombers where his cautious nature might be an asset. But that felt like admitting defeat, like confirming what everyone already believed about him. Instead, he started studying combat tactics obsessively, reading after-action reports from other squadrons, analyzing what worked and what got pilots killed. He noticed a pattern. The most successful fighter pilots weren't necessarily the most aggressive. They were the ones who controlled the engagement, who dictated the terms of the fight, who made the enemy react rather than reacting themselves. But the reports always focused on the kills, the moments of victory. They didn't talk about the setup, the positioning, the decisions that created those opportunities. Gabby started thinking about his cowardice differently. What if his tendency to extend away, to break off attacks, wasn't weakness but positioning? What if he could use the enemy's aggression against them? What if he could make them think he was retreating, lure them into pursuing, and then reverse the situation when they were committed and vulnerable? The concept was simple, but psychologically difficult. It required looking like a coward, acting like a coward, letting the enemy believe they were winning, and then exploiting that belief. Most fighter pilots' egos wouldn't allow it. They wanted to be seen as brave, aggressive, dominant. The idea of appearing weak, even deliberately, was repugnant. But Gabby had already been labeled a coward. He had nothing to lose by leaning into that reputation, by making it strategic rather than shameful. He started experimenting. On his next mission, when a Bf-109 bounced his flight from above, Gabby didn't try to fight back immediately. He dove away, extended at high speed, looked like he was running. The Bf-109 pilot, seeing easy prey, followed, and kept following, burning fuel, losing altitude, getting farther from his own squadron. After 30 seconds, Gabby pulled into a climbing turn using the speed he'd built in, his dive. The Bf-109 tried to follow, but he was slower now, had less energy. Gabby reversed, came back at him from a position of advantage, and opened fire. Hits along the wing and fuselage. The Bf-109 broke off and dove away trailing smoke. Gabby didn't get credit for a kill. The aircraft wasn't observed to crash, but he'd proven his concept. Strategic retreat could create opportunities. The enemy's aggression could be a weakness if you knew how to exploit it. He refined the technique over the next month. He'd engage normally, but as soon as the enemy committed to pursuing him, he'd extend away, not randomly, but along a carefully chosen vector that put him in position for a reversal. He'd let the enemy close, let them think they were winning, let them burn energy and lose situational awareness. And then he'd reverse, using the energy he'd preserved and attack from an unexpected angle. The technique required precise calculation. Extend too far and you lost the engagement. Entirely, gave the enemy time to reset. Don't extend far enough and you couldn't build the energy advantage needed for the reversal. The timing had to be perfect. Reverse too early and the enemy could counter, too late and you'd actually be running. But when executed correctly, it was devastatingly effective. The enemy expected fleeing prey. They got a predator that had been setting a trap. Gabby scored his first confirmed kill in April 1943 using the technique. A FW-190 had bounced him from above. Gabby extended away, let the German pilot chase for 40 seconds, then reversed into a climbing turn that put him above and behind his pursuer. One burst from his .850 caliber machine guns and the FW-190 exploded. His squadron mates were surprised but not impressed. Gabreski finally got a kill, probably got lucky after running away as usual. His second kill came a week later, same technique. This time the squadron commander noticed the pattern and called him in. Gabreski, I've been reviewing your gun camera footage. You're extending away, letting the enemy pursue, then reversing on them. That's not standard doctrine. No, sir, it's not. But it's working. 2 kills in 2 weeks after 6 months with nothing. Yes, sir. Explain your thinking. Gabby explained the concept, strategic retreat, energy management, using the enemy's aggression to create vulnerability. The commander listened skeptically. That's not how we train pilots. We teach aggressive engagement, pressing attacks, dominating the enemy through firepower and maneuverability. Sir, aggressive engagement works when you have numerical superiority or a performance advantage. We're often outnumbered and the Germans have experienced pilots in good aircraft. My technique turns their aggression into a disadvantage. By running away. By appearing to run away, sir, there's a difference. The commander thought about this. All right, Gabreski, keep doing what you're doing, but the other pilots are calling you a coward. That's not going to change just because you're getting kills now. I know, sir. I don't care what they call me as long as the technique works. Over the next month, Gabby scored 5 more confirmed kills, all using variations of his strategic retreat technique. He'd engage, extend, lure the enemy into pursuit, then reverse when their energy state was low and their situational awareness was focused entirely on the chase. The kills were accumulating, but so was the confusion among his squadron mates. How is Gabreski getting all these kills? He still flies like a coward, always running away. Yeah, but then he comes back and shoots them down. It's weird. I don't trust it. One of these days, his strategic retreat is going to turn into actual retreat, and he's going to leave his wingman hanging. The skepticism bothered Gabby less than he expected. He'd been called a coward for so long that the accusation no longer had power over him, and the kills were proving his technique worked. 7 confirmed kills in 6 weeks. He was suddenly one of the higher-scoring pilots in the squadron. On May 17, 1943, Gabby would fly a mission that would force everyone, his squadron mates, his commanders, even the Germans, to understand that what looked like cowardice was actually the most calculated aggression they'd ever seen. The mission briefing on May 17, 1943 was straightforward. Escort B-17 bombers attacking aircraft factories in Bremen, deep in northern Germany. The intelligence officer warned that the Luftwaffe had been reinforcing their fighter groups in the region, bringing in experienced pilots from the Eastern Front. Expect heavy resistance. Gabby took off at 0900 hours with his squadron, climbing to 25,000 feet over the North Sea. The weather was clear, the bombers were on time, and the formation was tight. Everything looked good until they crossed into German airspace. The Luftwaffe hit them hard, multiple fighter groups, attacking from different altitudes, coordinated and aggressive. The American escorts scattered, each flight engaging enemy fighters, trying to keep them away from the bombers. Gabby's flight of 4 P-47s was jumped by a gruppy of Bf-109s. He counted at least 12, maybe more. The standard response would be to turn into the attack, engage aggressively, try to disrupt the German formation. Instead, Gabby did what everyone expected him to do. He extended away at full throttle, diving slightly to build speed. His wingmen followed, confused but trusting his lead. The Bf-109s pursued. This was exactly what they wanted. American fighters running, giving up altitude and position, isolated from their formation. The German pilots were experienced, had shot down dozens of bombers and fighters over the past year. They knew how to coordinate attacks, how to cut off escape routes, how to kill running prey. But Gabby wasn't actually running. He was setting the trap. He monitored his speed, pushing 450 miles per hour in a shallow dive. The Bf-109s behind him were doing maybe 420, closing slowly but burning fuel aggressively at full throttle. Gabby was leading them west, away from the bomber formations, away from other German fighters who might help them, isolating them, making them commit. After 90 seconds of retreat, Gabby called to his wingmen, "Prepare to reverse on my mark. Split 2 and 2. We're going to scissors them." "Boss, there's at least 8 109s behind us," his wingman protested. "We're outnumbered 2 to 1. They're strung out, low on energy, focused on the chase. Trust me, break on my mark." Gabby watched his airspeed, 440 miles per hour. He started a gentle climb, bleeding some speed deliberately. The Bf-109s behind him, seeing him slow, closed more aggressively. They thought he was running out of energy, that the chase was ending. They were wrong. At 420 miles per hour, Gabby called, "Mark, brake left and right." He pulled hard, left, his P-47 turning tight, using the speed he'd built to overcome the Thunderbolt's normally sluggish turn rate. His wingman broke right, splitting the German formation. The 8 pursuing Bf-109s suddenly had to choose which pair of Americans to follow. They split. 4 went left after Gabby, 4 went right after his wingman. But now the geometry had changed. The Germans weren't chasing anymore. They were turning, bleeding energy in hard turns, trying to reacquire targets that had suddenly stopped running and started fighting. Gabby completed his turn, rolled wings level, and found himself looking at the 4 Bf-109s that had followed him. They were in a ragged line, each focused on where Gabby was, not watching their spacing, not coordinating. They'd gone from hunters to a mob chasing prey. Gabby selected the last aircraft in the line and dove on it from above. The Bf-109 pilot was still fixated on where Gabby had been, hadn't realized Gabby had reversed and climbed. By the time he saw the P-47 diving on him, it was too late. Gabby opened fire at 300 yards. The Bf-109's canopy shattered, the aircraft nosed over, and smoke poured from the engine. 1 down. But the other 3 Bf-109s had seen their squadron mate go down and were turning toward Gabby. Now he was the one being pursued again, 3 against 1. Perfect. Gabby extended again, not in panic but deliberately, building speed in a shallow dive. The 3 Bf-109s followed, reforming into a proper combat formation, a leader and 2 wingmen in trail. They'd learned from their mistake, were being more careful now. But they were still chasing, still burning fuel, still committed to the pursuit. Gabby led them in a gentle left-hand turn, a long, sweeping arc that kept his speed up while making the Germans think he was trying to evade back toward friendly territory. They followed the arc, staying in formation, waiting for an opportunity to close and fire. But Gabby wasn't evading. He was positioning. He was bringing them around in a circle, bleeding their energy gradually, waiting for the moment when they'd be slow and vulnerable. After a full 360-degree turn, 90 seconds of sweeping left, Gabby reversed hard right. The sudden reversal caught the German leader by surprise. He'd been anticipating a continued left turn, had positioned himself for that. When Gabby broke right instead, the German overshot, his momentum carrying him past Gabby's new flight path. Gabby rolled into the turn, pulled hard, and came out directly behind the German leader. The Bf-109 pilot realized his mistake and tried to brake, but he was slow, maybe 250 miles per hour after the long pursuit and turn. Gabby's P-47 was still doing 350. He closed rapidly, fired a 3-second burst. The Bf-109's engine exploded, 2 down. The 2 remaining Bf-109s split, one going high, one going low, trying to set up a pincer attack. They were being professional now, coordinating, not making the same mistake twice. But they were also low on fuel and low on energy after several minutes of full-throttle pursuit. Gabby had been managing his fuel carefully, had never gone to full emergency power, had preserved his energy state. He climbed toward the higher Bf-109, accepting the threat from the lower one to focus on the immediate danger above. The German pilot saw Gabby climbing toward him and dove to meet the attack head-on. This was dangerous. Head-on passes happened at combined closure speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour, gave both pilots only a split second to fire. Most head-on passes ended with both aircraft missing. But Gabby had been practicing deflection shooting for months. He understood the geometry, had calculated the lead angles dozens of times. As the Bf-109 dove toward him, Gabby didn't aim at the aircraft. He aimed at where the aircraft would be in 1 second. He fired a short burst, then immediately broke down in right to avoid collision. The Bf-109 flew through the stream of 50 caliber rounds. The propeller disintegrated, the engine seized, and the aircraft nosed up sharply before tumbling out of control. 3 down. The last Bf-109, the one that had gone low, was now climbing back into the fight. But he'd seen 3 of his squadron mates shot down in less than 2 minutes. He'd seen Gabby's retreat turn into a methodical destruction of an entire flight of experienced German pilots. The psychology of the situation had shifted. The German pilot was no longer hunting. He was trying not to become the 4th kill. He broke off, diving away toward the east, heading home. Gabby let him go. He'd made his point. He scanned the sky looking for his wingmen. They were a few miles away, still engaged with the 4 Bf-109s that had pursued them. Gabby called on the radio. 2-3 status. We're defensive, boss. Could use some help. Gabby turned toward his wingmen, climbing to regain altitude. He could see the fight, his 2 wingmen in a defensive scissor, turning hard to prevent the 4 Bf-109s from getting good firing positions. The Germans were pressing the attack, coordinated and aggressive, 4 against 2, and the Americans were losing energy with every defensive turn. Gabby dove into the fight from above, picking the trailing Bf-109. He didn't call out his attack. The element of surprise was more valuable than coordination. He closed to 200 yards and fired. Hits along the wing and fuselage. The Bf-109 rolled away trailing smoke. 4 confirmed kills for Gabby, maybe 5 if the earlier damaged aircraft had crashed. The other 3 Bf-109s saw Gabby's attack and broke off immediately. They'd lost at least 4 aircraft from an 8-plane formation, possibly more. The Americans they'd thought were running had destroyed half their Gruppe. The mathematics no longer favored the Germans. They extended away, diving for speed, heading east toward safety. Gabby reformed with his wingmen. Everyone okay? We're good, boss. Did you just shoot down 4 Germans? 3 confirmed, maybe 4. Hard to keep track. Jesus Christ, Gabby. You were running for 2 minutes, then you just tore them apart. I wasn't running. I was positioning. They climbed back to altitude, looking for the bomber formation they were supposed to be escorting. The B-17s were already on their way home, their bomb run complete, their formation intact. The American escorts had done their job, kept most of the German fighters busy while the bombers hit their targets. Gabby's fuel gauge showed he'd burned more fuel than he'd planned. The extended chase, the multiple engagements, the aggressive maneuvering, it had all consumed gas. He had maybe 20 minutes of flight time remaining, enough to reach the English coast, but not enough to make it back to their home base. They landed at a coastal emergency field, refueled, and flew back to King's Cliff. When Gabby climbed out of his cockpit, the ground crew immediately noticed the gun. Barrels. They were hot, discolored from firing. "Lieutenant Gabreski, how much did you shoot today?" "About 1,200 rounds, maybe 1,500. "You usually come back with most of your ammo. What happened?" "I got 4 confirmed kills, maybe 5. Word spread through the base within the hour. Gabreski, the coward who always ran away, had just shot down 4 German fighters in one engagement. The squadron intelligence officer debriefed him extensively, trying to understand the tactics. Gabby explained his strategic retreat concept, how he'd lured the Germans into pursuit, how he'd reversed when they were vulnerable. "Lieutenant, what you're describing is essentially a feint. You pretend to retreat, lure the enemy into a trap, then reverse and attack when they're committed. That's actually brilliant, but it requires incredible discipline. Most pilots' egos won't allow them to appear weak." "My ego was already destroyed when everyone started calling me a coward, sir. I had nothing to lose by making it strategic." The other pilots' attitudes began to shift slowly. The nickname coward didn't disappear. Squadron nicknames rarely did, but the tone changed. It became less an insult and more an ironic acknowledgement of Gabby's unusual tactics. "The coward got 4 more kills today. Maybe we should all fly like cowards." The May 17th engagement changed everything for Gabby Gabreski. Within a week, every fighter squadron in the 8th Air Force had heard about the pilot who'd lured 8 Bf-109s into a trap by pretending to retreat, then systematically destroyed them. Tactical officers requested detailed debriefs, asked Gabby to explain his technique, wanted to know if it could be taught to other pilots. Gabby tried to explain, but most pilots struggled with the psychological component. "You have to look like you're losing," he said during one training session. "You have to let the enemy believe they're winning. That requires suppressing every instinct that tells you to fight back immediately. Most pilots can't do that. Their pride won't allow it." "So you're saying this technique only works for pilots who don't have pride?" one skeptical captain asked. "I'm saying it works for pilots whose pride isn't tied to looking aggressive every second of the fight. My pride is in winning. If looking weak for 2 minutes means I win the fight, I'll look weak." Over the next 14 months, Gabby flew 166 more combat missions. His kill count climbed steadily, not through reckless aggression, but through careful execution of his strategic retreat technique. By July 1944, he had 28 confirmed kills, making him one of the top American aces in the European theater. He was promoted to colonel, given command of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and became a living legend in the fighter community. But his technique remained controversial. Traditional fighter pilots, the aggressive, instinctive flyers who'd grown up idolizing World War I aces, saw Gabby's methods as unsporting, even cowardly despite the results. They believed air combat should be about courage and aggression, not tricks and traps. The idea of deliberately appearing to retreat, of using perceived weakness as strategy, violated their understanding of what it meant to be a fighter pilot. The younger pilots, the ones who'd grown up during the Depression and learned that survival sometimes required swallowing pride, understood Gabby's approach better. They saw the mathematics. His technique worked, kept pilots alive, achieved better kill ratios than traditional aggressive tactics. They started adopting variations of it, developing their own feint retreat maneuvers. The Germans noticed too. Luftwaffe intelligence reports from mid-1944 referenced American pilots who used false retreat tactics to lure German fighters into vulnerable positions. One captured German pilot, interrogated after being shot down, described encountering an American who flew like he was retreating, but was actually setting a trap. "We lost 3 aircraft to him in 5 minutes. He made us look like students." Gabby's combat tour ended in July 1944. He'd flown more missions than almost any other American fighter pilot, had 28 confirmed kills, and probably another dozen damaged or unconfirmed. He was rotated back to the United States for a war bonds tour, given a hero's welcome, and told his fighting days were over. He was too valuable as propaganda to risk in combat. He hated it. The speeches, the war bond rallies, the newspaper interviews, none of it felt real compared to combat. But he played his role, raised millions for the war effort, and waited for the war to end so he could return to some semblance of normal life. The war ended in August 1945. Gabby stayed in the Air Force, transitioned to jets, flew in Korea where he shot down 6.5 more enemy aircraft, bringing his lifetime total to 34.5 kills. He retired as a colonel in 1967 after 26 years of service, having flown 3 wars and become one of the most successful fighter pilots in American history. But the technique he'd pioneered, strategic retreat as offensive tactic, lived on long after his retirement. In the 1960s, when the Air Force was developing modern fighter tactics for the jet age, Gabby's concepts were formalized into what became known as the sucker punch maneuver. The principle was identical: appear vulnerable, lure the enemy into pursuit, then reverse when they're committed and energy depleted. Fighter pilots in Vietnam used variations of Gabby's technique against North Vietnamese MiGs. F-4 Phantom crews would extend away from pursuing MiG-17s, let them chase, then reverse, using the Phantom's superior power and speed. The tactic became standard in the loose deuce formation doctrine that dominated American fighter tactics in the late 1960s. The technique even influenced tactics outside aviation. In 1974, Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in the famous Rumble in the Jungle boxing match. Ali spent the first 7 rounds leaning against the ropes, appearing to take punishment, letting Foreman tire himself out throwing heavy punches. Then in the 8th round, when Foreman was exhausted, Ali attacked and knocked him out. Ali called the technique rope-a-dope. Let your opponent think they're winning, conserve your energy, then strike when they're vulnerable. Sports journalists asked Ali if he'd been inspired by military tactics. Ali said he'd developed the technique himself, but boxing analysts noted the similarity to strategic retreat concepts from fighter pilot doctrine. Whether Ali knew about Gabby Gabreski's World War II tactics or independently discovered the same principle, the underlying psychology was identical. Let your opponent's aggression become their weakness. Modern fighter pilots learn Gabby's concepts as part of basic fighter maneuvers training, though usually without knowing the historical origin. They learn the extend and reverse tactic, where you extend away from a pursuing enemy to build energy separation, then reverse to attack from a position of advantage. They learn the sucker punch, where you deliberately appear vulnerable to lure the enemy into a trap. They learn that appearing weak can be a form of strength, that strategic retreat can set up tactical victory. The Air Force published a comprehensive study in 1995 on psychological warfare in air combat, which included an extensive section on Gabby's techniques. The study concluded, Colonel Gabreski's strategic retreat tactics represented a fundamental understanding that air combat is as much psychological as physical. By controlling the enemy's perception, making them believe they were winning, he could manipulate their behavior, make them commit to attacks that left them vulnerable. This principle remains valid regardless of aircraft performance or weapons technology. Gabby himself never liked being called innovative or revolutionary. When asked about his tactics in interviews during his retirement, he'd always say the same thing. I wasn't being clever, I was being practical. I couldn't outfight the Germans through pure aggression. They had too much experience, too many advantages, so I found a way to make their aggression work against them. It wasn't about courage or cowardice, it was about winning. But the pilots who'd called him the coward eventually understood what he'd been doing. At a reunion of the 56th Fighter Group in 1982, one of Gabby's former squadron mates stood up during dinner and proposed a toast. To Gabby Gabreski, the coward who taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is look weak. The man who proved that pride isn't about appearing strong, it's about winning. The pilot who destroyed 28 German fighters by making them think he was running away. Gabby died in 2002 at the age of 83. His funeral was attended by fighter pilots from multiple generations, from World War II veterans to F-15 pilots who were flying combat missions in Afghanistan. They all understood that they owed something to Gabby's tactics, to his willingness to be called a coward while developing techniques that kept pilots alive and won fights. One of the eulogy speakers, a retired Air Force general who'd flown F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, said, Gabby Gabreski was called a coward by men who didn't understand that he was playing chess while they were playing checkers. He saw combat as a psychological game, not just a physical contest. He understood that controlling the enemy's perception was as important as controlling your aircraft. Every time a fighter pilot extends away to build energy separation, every time someone uses a feint to lure an opponent into a trap, every time psychological manipulation wins a fight that physical force couldn't, that's Gabby's legacy. At the Air Force Academy, Gabby's May 17, 1943 engagement is taught as a case study in adaptive tactics and psychological warfare. Cadets study the engagement from both perspectives, how Gabby set the trap and why the German pilots fell for it. The lesson isn't just about the specific maneuvers, it's about understanding that effective tactics sometimes require doing things that look wrong, that appear weak, that contradict traditional notions of courage. The instructor who teaches the class tells cadets, Gabreski's squadron mates called him a coward for 6 months. They watched him break off attacks, extend away from fights, avoid aggressive engagement. They assumed he was weak. They were wrong. He was preparing. He was learning. He was developing a technique that would eventually make him one of the most successful fighter pilots in American history. The lesson? Don't confuse caution with cowardice, and don't confuse aggression with effectiveness. Modern air combat doctrine incorporates Gabby's principles throughout. The shoot and scoot tactic, fire missiles then immediately extend away, is essentially strategic retreat. The drag maneuver, one fighter deliberately attracts enemy attention while teammates position for attack, is a formalized version of Gabby's feint. The entire concept of energy management in air combat, preserving your aircraft's energy state while depleting the enemy's, traces back to Gabby's understanding that pursuit was expensive, that chasing burning fuel and altitude, that a retreating enemy could be setting a trap. In 2018, the Air Force unveiled a new training simulator specifically designed to teach strategic retreat tactics. The simulator was named the Gabreski Tactical Trainer. Fighter pilots training on it learn to recognize when extending away is the correct tactical choice, when appearing vulnerable creates opportunities, when psychological manipulation can be more effective than physical force. Gabby would have been embarrassed by the attention. He never wanted to be remembered as an innovator or a tactical genius. He just wanted to be a fighter pilot who did his job and came home alive. But the squadron that had mocked him as a coward eventually understood what his former squadron commander wrote in a 1965 letter. Gabreski's greatest contribution wasn't the 28 kills. It was teaching us that there's more than one way to win a fight, that tradition isn't always right, and that the pilot everyone calls a coward might be the bravest person in the squadron. They mocked the coward pilot until his retreat trick destroyed 8 Bf-109s, until his strategic withdrawal technique became Doctrine, until his psychological warfare approach revolutionized fighter tactics, until the man they'd dismissed as weak proved he was playing a different game entirely, one where looking weak was the strongest move possible. The inner ear infection, the chronic vertigo, the constant mockery. Gabby endured it all by understanding something his critics didn't. Winning isn't about looking strong. It's about being smart enough to control how your enemy sees you, brave enough to endure mockery while you develop techniques they don't understand, and disciplined enough to execute tactics that feel wrong because they violate traditional notions of courage. Francis Gabby Gabreski wasn't a coward. He was a tactician who understood that air combat was as much psychology as physics, who proved that strategic retreat could be offensive, who changed how fighter pilots thought about courage and aggression. Every time a modern fighter pilot extends away to reset a fight, they're using Gabby's technique. Every time someone lures an opponent into pursuit, then reverses, they're executing Gabby's trap. Every time psychological manipulation wins a fight that force couldn't, they're proving that the coward they mocked in 1943 understood combat better than anyone realized.